Namaste. Welcome to the penultimate session of the Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020. My name is Keval Chavda, and today I am pleased to be chairing this session for you. From Twitter to television, telling our story. National Hindu Students Forum was founded in 1991 with a vision to unite Hindu students across the country and so that they are able to protect, preserve, practice, and promote Hindu dharma. Today, NHSF UK societies across the country work tirelessly to achieve this same vision. The Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020 is a celebration of our Hindu identity and an exploration of how we can embody Hindu and dharmic ideas into our everyday lives to build a better future and tomorrow. Today, we are here to discuss the media, and specifically the Hindu and Indian voice in the media, and how we can influence and shape mainstream narratives. It is an honor to present to you today Manojji Ladva. Manojji was one of the founding members of NHSF back in 1991 and was in fact the founder president. He has since founded and is currently the CEO of India Inc. Group, a media house that produces content relating to India's economic and globalized strategic agenda. I'm also pleased to announce that iGlobal News, a part of India Inc., publishing content relating to the Indian diaspora, is our media partner for this conference. Manojji, welcome to the Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020.
Namaste, and thank you very much, and thank you for that very kind introduction, Keval.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to have you on. Before we dive into talking about the media and media narratives, just before we went live, we were reminiscing about your times of the foundations of NHSF back in 1991. So I just wanted to quickly start off with, why was NHSF founded? What was the need that was there for British Hindu students at the time?
It was a time when the second generation of Hindus in the UK were starting to go into university in larger numbers. So the generation of immigrants in the late 60s, early 70s, their children, which was a large wave of Indian and Hindu immigrants that came to the UK. It was the first big wave of students going into university. And what we found at the time, that there was significant representation for students that were of the Islamic faith, of the Christian faith, of the Jewish faith, but nothing for Hindu students. And so in marketing terms, there was a gap in the market. But at a community level, there were growing concerns that young people from our community, once they went to university, somehow, somewhere along the line, they became disconnected with their community, sometimes with their family, and therefore with their culture as well. And this was a way in which we could ensure that that cord between the community and our student population remained and strengthened, so that we were able to then build upon those relationships for the future.
Yeah, and thank you very much for going through that. I think it's important scene setting for our audience here today. And I'd just like to pick up further on what you said about there was a gap in the market, and specifically about marketing. So today's session on media will be exploring narratives and what we can do to plug those gaps. Before we get started with those questions, I think it'd be good to hear from you in 1 to 2 minutes. What would you define as media, and what different types of media currently exist in the world around us today?
Firstly, let me go back to the point about National Hindu Students' Forum to put it into context, the founding years. It was a time when email had just come, and most of us didn't have email access. We certainly didn't have laptops at home, and iPad had not been invented. Mobile phones and, those were way out of our reach. And we used to write letters most of the time between students or call on landlines. So it was at the edge of the technological revolution that we're now seeing and you guys are enjoying. And I guess that nicely falls into the definition of what media is, or what I define as media. Media ultimately is a medium, a mechanism to convey a thought, an idea, a message, information. And so to that extent, this is media. Our conversation on this platform is a form of media activity. But the view that is the traditional view of media is a television screen, a printed piece of paper or sheets of paper, which became a newspaper. But I think all of that is being now demolished, and that there has been emerging a democratization of the medium. That before it used to be, you had to be super rich to be a media baron, to own a newspaper, to own a television channel. But now each and every one of us, whether it's our Facebook posts or our tweets or LinkedIn, I still haven't worked out Instagram, but I believe that Instagram is the new norm, and Snapchat and all the others. In some way or other, we are all media barons. We're all communicating views, news, ideas ourselves. So for me, in the last 20 years, 25 years, there's been a huge shift. But the definition of media remains exactly the same. The method to communicate ideas, views, news, opinion.
I'd like to go just back a bit to when you spoke about traditional media, and we touched on it at the end there, that media barons used to be these wealthy figures that dominated print, that dominated television, and magazines as well, I guess, to an extent. I just want to know, how has the power shifted then? So, and with that power shift, have we seen actually a more uniform coverage of issues relating to the let's start with the British population resident in the UK today?
So there's different aspects or different parts of that question. Firstly, certainly there's more news out there. We have more access to information, to news, than ever before. Before, you would wait for the morning paper, or wait, and we would sit for the 9 o'clock news, and the family would sit, and that's where you have the news. Or you switch on the radio, and on the hour, every hour, you would get a news bulletin. Now, access has increased. The quantum of information flow is unprecedented. That I can sit here and I can access news from around the world within seconds. That wasn't the case at the time. But some would argue, and I'm sympathetic to this argument, that there is less insight now, but more noise. There is less analysis of the news and the issues that are there, or at least less debate or discussion on it.
Hmm.
And often news becomes reduced to another channel of entertainment, so a soap opera, and we can see that. We can see that with the US elections currently. And the fact is that those that are in the news, that make the news, also see that as the way to ensure that they're successful.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that we're any more informed or intelligently informed than maybe 20, 30 years ago.
And in this quantum of information flow that you just described very carefully there, surely if there's more information, there's more uniformity of views in the sense of, there's more diverse views. So there will be different perspectives, and as a consumer of media, we should see that. We should see
Yes.
debate and insight. So
yes, no, absolutely, Keval. And with every negative, there's a positive, and one of the positives is certainly that having access to different news sources, you can get a diverse set of opinion, but I use the word can because unfortunately now the majority of people frankly consume their news not only from their mobile phone but from the Facebook app or the Insta app. And the algorithms of Facebook and Insta and all the others will only show you the things that you like, that you're interested in. And so what in effect is happening is that you're not getting diverse views. All you're getting is more of the same. In effect, we've created a digital echo chamber where we see things that we like, we hear things that we like, we share things that we like, and we perpetuate a view or an idea that suits us through the ignorance of other views and ideas. And I know we're going to probably come to the point about where Hindus fit in all of this, these echo chambers. But I think the views and opinions of Hindus and Indians in this massive battle of media often get lost.
I think we can move on to it now, and seeing as you've set it up so nicely, I guess just for the purposes of clarity and for myself and the audience, it'd be great to hear in your work with India Inc. and iGlobal News, what do you perceive that the current narrative is for Indians and Hindus in the UK?
So I didn't come from a media training background. I didn't. I studied law at university. I had my own legal practice for many years, and so it's not a background that I set out at university or at school to decide that I would go into media or journalism. It's something that grew on me, partly out of frustration that the things that I cared about as a British born Hindu, as somebody of Indian origin, those things, those issues were not being either aired in the media, or if there were Hindu issues or viewpoints, then more often than not, they would be the subject of misinterpretation, misrepresentation, and ultimately ridicule. Whether it was the issue of caste or the issue of poverty in India, or some religious practices, exceptions to our way of life were being highlighted as the norm, that we were people of snake charmers and were very exotic in our celebrations, in our festivals, but not seen to be a thoughtful spiritual community.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that was a concern to me and concern to a lot of my friends. And that only got perpetuated over the years. But as far as India Inc., my media platform, is concerned, I felt a growing need to tell a story. We're all living in a time of significant upheaval and change. And that started, this particular wave started about 20 odd years ago, where there are two major globalization stories happening. On the one hand, the China story, and the other hand, the India story. These are the two big globalizations that are happening. In the past, it was the British and the Romans and the Greeks and so on. But this is the next big story. The Chinese story is driven by its state, its government, and we're seeing that increasingly in sometimes quite alarming ways. Whereas the Indian story, and in that, the Hindu story as well, is driven by its businesses and its people. And it's that story, the story of Keval, the story of your family, the story of our friends and their businesses and so on. It's that story that India Inc. seeks to tell to the world. Not necessarily only to the diaspora, though, as you kindly mentioned, we now have a diaspora platform specifically for the British Indian community called iGlobal. To give a different perspective about India and about Hindus to the world. And it's not about papering over the cracks. There are practices within the Hindu community that I'm sure you and I would not agree with. There are people that are of Hindu background that we would say, no, that's not the right thing or the ethical thing to be doing. But there is a need for the world to look at our perspectives and for us to tell it with the glass being half full rather than half empty. So that's the role of India Inc. And with the blessings of friends and a fantastic team, we've grown significantly over the last few years. And as many of the people watching this will know, that we host probably now India's largest global conference, India Global Week, which last ended in July as well. So we're on that journey. It's that story that we're telling.
So we've got, as you said, more, I'm going to use the word institutionalized, but on the verge of becoming institutionalized, on the verge of becoming mainstream, and projecting that voice, that Hindu Indian voice. What can we do as individuals and specifically as Hindu youth in this country to get our voice out there? Organizations, not only NHSF UK, but there's a dearth of organizations in this country that are doing amazing work. So how do we promote that voice?
Three things. And these are things that every student that's watching this would have been taught from the age of 5. To read, to write, and to speak. That's all we've got to do. If we read more, I guess with reading is listen more. We start to write. And one of my requests to you and your team at National Hindu Students Forum is to revive a magazine that we set up called Hum, which was the official magazine of National Hindu Students Forum many years ago. And the idea behind hum was to encourage young people, young students within NHSF to write more. And through writing, you, of course, are conveying a message to other people, but you are able to refine your own thoughts and your own arguments, and therefore do more of that. Yes, of course, now we're in the age of video, and through India Inc., we're producing more video content and so on, but the same principles of reading and writing apply, and speaking. Speak out. If you believe in something, speak out. Because if you don't, others will interpret your silence as meekness, as weakness. And in 30 years' time, you will still be having these conversations with the next generation of National Hindu Students Forum leaders as well.
Yes, and I think something you said there was quite interesting, that as we've transitioned from print media to more digital-based content, I'd be quite interested to get your views on how you see not only the increasing digitalization of media that's been ongoing probably since the last decade or so, but also the impact of COVID on how we would go about consuming and digesting our media as individuals.
So, look, there's a lot of discussion about COVID and its impact on society, and more and more so on its impact upon the media. And it's a very good question. I think what COVID has done is fast-track the inevitable. And let's take, for example, the retail sector, shops. For the last 7-10 years, analyst after analyst has been saying that, look, there's going to be a crisis on our high streets. People are going to be turning more to e-commerce and to buying online. For you guys, it comes naturally. For us, we have to, my generation and the generation senior to us, it's something that we're becoming more and more used to. But what high street shops would have, and brands would have taken another 4, 5, 10 years to do, they've had to do in 5 and 10 months. So this is the new reality of digital content, digital interactions like this. But we shouldn't be fooled to think that we're just going to live in a virtual world. We just have to look at this weekend. The moment some restrictions get lifted off, then people just swarm together wanting to have physical human interaction for all the wrong reasons this weekend. But I think the future is going to be a hybrid future, that we will continue to have these sorts of virtual events, but also physical events that happen as well. And that's the same in the media as well. So with India Inc., we've been known to host some very, very high profile events, global events in person. We host the India Global Awards, India Global Week, where people come together and they fly from all over the world. This year was totally virtual, where we had participants from about 77 countries. Next year, we are planning and accept the fact that it's going to be a hybrid model. Hopefully that there will be a lifting of some restrictions and a vaccine would be found. So that's the world we're going to move into. Also, I think that you're going to find the emergence of more and more niche channels and publications online that will cater to a particular demographic or a particular view. And we do this constantly. We are constantly at India Inc. looking through our user and database and tailoring content and tracking and seeing what people are interested in. But what we're equally keen on is bringing in contrarian views and arguments. And so those media organizations are able to balance those, are the ones that are going to be successful.
And focusing on these niche channels and these newer ways of putting our perspectives and our narratives out there, how do we encourage young people to actually take up these digital and video content, I guess, mediums? Do we have that skill within our community, within our youth, or do we need to upskill to be better able to do that?
I take my own journey as a reference point and an example. Like I said, that I did not start my studies thinking that I would have a media platform or a media business. It's something that was driven by passion, driven by, I guess, a mission that I wanted to correct a skewed narrative. And so you don't have to study media studies. And I guess the majority of the students participating in this, they're going to be doing engineering, accounting, law, medicine, all of those professions. Why? Because they think that that's where the money is. Well, they're probably right. Their parents have encouraged them to do that. And that a career in the media is not quite the Indian or the Hindu community thing to do. That has to change. And the work that we're doing at India Inc., and I mentioned offline as well that we're going to be launching a media academy, the India Inc. Media Academy, specifically to build capacity within our community to encourage more people to speak, to write, produce good quality content, and to teach them how to. And that's not necessarily because we think that they will then go on to become presenters on BBC and write for the Sunday Times and whatever. And if they do, then fantastic. But for us to be able to articulate across different media and to build capacity, and we're looking at a participating audience from the age of 14 to 104. So starting a career or an activity within media is not necessarily somebody that is going to university and their first graduate job. It starts young, but it should be something that you're engaged in throughout your life, and certainly after retirement when you've got a lot more time on your hands to share all of those experiences and ideas and life lessons. That's when you can be the best journalist, I feel.
Yeah. So just take a brief pause there from the questions. We've got quite a few questions coming in from our audience, and I do encourage that if you do have any further questions, please do put them into the YouTube chat. Our audience members has asked on the passive consumerism that we see, and I guess that is exacerbated by the digital echo chamber that we find ourselves in. So how do we go about challenging that? How do we get out of the habit of passively consuming everything and actually critically think and delve deeper than what is at face value?
You've used a very interesting and I think appropriate phrase, passive consumerism. The starting point, if you want to address that, is to stop thinking of ourselves as consumers of media. We are stakeholders. We have an interest in what is said about us, what is said about our families, our community, about our society. And therefore, rather than thinking of ourselves as consumers, we are participants in this new, vibrant, exciting world. And let's face it, it's not something that's you're going to have to really force yourself to become active, because you're doing it already. You're posting on Facebook, you're presenting your pictures and videos on Instagram, on Twitter, and so on. So you're doing it already. What I would encourage is to people to do that through emotion, through excitement, to share stories about your friends and your family. Of course, there's a place for that. But maybe once a week, just once a week, respond to a news item with a considered view back and share it with your friends and post it on one of your social media channels and start a discussion. And even if you don't start a discussion, and I'll give you an example. I write a weekly column called Globally Speaking, and I've been doing it every Friday for the last 6 years. I must have missed about 7 or 8 occasions when I haven't been able to write. And I do get reactions, but initially in the first few years, I used to be pessimistic. I used to sit there and think, why isn't anybody responding to this? Why aren't they commenting? Am I writing something which people are not finding interesting? It's boring. It's not relevant. Then I took a step back and said, I must consume about 1.5 hours or 2 hours worth of social media and news content a day. How many times do I actually react? I register, but I rarely react. And that's the majority. And so when you start posting, when you start writing, forget about who's reading it. There will be people that will be reading it. They'll be reading and registering it. And maybe the next time they meet you or see you, they'll give you a pat on the back, or they may violently disagree. But there are people that are watching, and I can say that from experience, and I have had people stop me these days at airports and on streets and said, we're your Facebook friend, or we follow you on Twitter. What you said that time, we agreed with. Once or twice I've had people that have almost quite violently disagreed with what I've said and let themselves know, but hey, that's part of life. You get active.
So we focused on our digital content as people. So we should be producing content, not worrying about who's reacting to it, but just getting the voice out there and heard. One of the questions that has
just before one other thing that often holds people back. Firstly, it's that barrier of what will people think. You get over that barrier and you start writing. Then the next area of procrastination when somebody's going on this journey is, how will I look? How will I look on the screen? How will the design be? Now, you just have to switch on the BBC. And they're doing interviews using these various platforms, and people are in their kitchens and in their bedrooms. And just yesterday, a member of parliament, a friend of mine, Tom Tugendhat, his 2 kids barged into an interview he was having on Sky, and it was fine, absolutely fine. So forget all of that polish. Yes, professional media organizations like India Inc. and our India Global Business and iGlobal, we will be more polished, but I have a battalion of people that are designers and write things for us and polish things up and make things up fine. But that doesn't necessarily mean that should stop anybody else from just getting out there and expressing themselves.
Mm.
And worst comes to worst, it's also a form of stress relief to get it off your chest.
I like that point. I do like that point. And so yeah, we focused on producing our content, sharing it, not um, to get our voice out there and to make sure uh, that there's a different view from the mainstream. One of our questions is actually asking about the mainstream, and it is when we encounter large or powerful media outlets, so I'm going to assume that to be the traditional media, presenting unfair or misleading narratives, how can we collectively challenge this without resorting to tribalism?
It's a good question. You either fight it and you argue it out, or you ignore it. Or the third one is to set up your own platforms and your own channels. Where did Facebook actually come from? The bedroom of Mark Zuckerberg and his friends and so on. Where did Twitter come from? Where did all of these platforms around the world actually come from? And going back to my point about the democratization of media, you don't have to be a wealthy media baron to create good content. So I guess the point is that if you the amount of content that is being produced across, people watch it and see it and move on. And in the same way, we've got to watch it, see it, move on, but then have an alternative narrative. It's not always that you need to pick a fight with, and I'm going to use the BBC or my friends at NDTV, if you don't agree with them. Sometimes they have their views. You set up your own platform. You set up your own channel. We've done that at India Inc. Because I don't agree with them. I don't agree with what the BBC writes about my community or what NDTV says about India and the politics of India. Therefore, we set up our own platform. In the same way, we've got to, as a community, support our community platforms, support our community media outlets, and to create a voice for ourselves. And it's not an internal echo chamber because there are people that are watching. For the work that we do, I would say at least half of our viewers and half of our readers are not Indian and are not Hindu. That's not, use the word tribalism. This is not tribalism. This is about a community, and let's take it the UK, that is the largest ethnic community in the UK. All its socioeconomic indicators indicate that it is an ideal community. We're at the top in education, or at least I hope so. We're one of the wealthiest communities in this country. We're law-abiding. We have views, we have opinions, we have a voice. So let's not think of this as tribalism. We are the representatives or the inheritors of the oldest civilization in the world, of the largest democracy in the world. And therefore, that is not a small, can I use the word piddly thing on the side? This is, we are mainstream. 25% of the global workforce in the next 15 years will be Indian. 1 in 4 people of the global workforce will be Indian. That's, again, something not to be shun away and say their views, their religious identity, their spiritual views should be brushed aside. They need to be heard. Now, if the BBC or NDTV don't take that on board, ignore them. Why waste your time with them? There's a much bigger ocean. Thanks to Mark Zuckerberg, thanks to Twitter, thanks to LinkedIn, thanks to Insta, Snapchat, etc., that we have a much wider reach that's possible.
And with that, I think it would be good to bring in this next question. So, Manoj, you mentioned earlier that we are stakeholders in influencing the media and not consumers. In a democratic society, can the audience overthrow the stakeholders? What are your thoughts regarding this?
I'm not keen on the words overthrow and stakeholders and so on. But the short answer is yes, we can influence change. We can influence change through simply sharing on WhatsApp. I find WhatsApp a fantastic medium where through its broadcast lists and so on, we're able to, in the press of a click of a button, able to share our views to a wide variety of people and engage with them as well. I don't think it is about replacing one view for another view. And even if you take it at an ideological level, we are a long, long way away from that. Our issue as a community, as a British Hindu community, is something different. And that is, in order to influence and to share a view, you've got to have a view yourself. Now, I don't think, and it's very difficult too often to have a collective view on things. So that's why National Hindu Students Forum and the work you do and the convening you do is very, very important. But what you can do is you can build out a narrative which is your own. You can share views, but the thing is that you've got to have a position on things. Is there a Hindu position on Brexit? No, certainly not. We're on different sides of the spectrum. But what about on GM foods, for instance? You know, there's a massive debate on GM foods. Can we draw upon our religious and philosophical and spiritual backgrounds to come up with a collective view on that? On a whole variety of different things that happen on a day-to-day basis. It's not necessary that there has to be a Hindu view or an Indian view. But where there are opportunities, then surely there is scope for some sort of collective conversation around that and forming a view. I can't remember, and this is now I'm going to be very provocative, I can't remember the last time I heard that the National Hindu Students Forum expressed a view forcefully on a political issue of the day. There may be, but this is the time, you have the opportunity, you have a platform to formulate views, to formulate policy and articulate those. As a media entrepreneur, and I put that hat on, I'd be interested in the National Hindu Students Forum's views on various subjects of the day and would certainly carry it.
Yeah, and I think that ties into a wider point, which we've also had from our audience to say that with our dharma being so broad and so you just mentioned that the Hindu civilization is the oldest and therefore we are mainstream, we need a voice. How do we collectively come
And and so on. So I don't understand algorithms. I won't comment on that. Look, there's never going to be one view, but there will be views that are the logic and the force of the view, even if it's one person's or one organization's views, it's the force of logic that prevails at the end of the day. Yes, numbers matter. And yes, it would be great if National Hindu Students Forum, the BAPS, ISKCON, and various other community organizations get together. And you do, and we do get together as a community. And there have been many instances like that in the past where our community leadership have got together. It's not that we are completely incoherent or divided. That's not the case. We do get together, and that's something that the next generation should also take encouragement of. But the starting point is that National Hindu Students Forum should have a view. Let's say, for example, yesterday I was watching again the BBC, and they had a package on relationships within the Asian community, and they quickly went into forced marriages and so on. And the people that they were interviewing were certainly not from the Hindu faith, and were not from India either. And yet this was an Asian issue which was given a negative connotation to. Whether you look at Rotherham, for example, and the grooming incidents were there, not in my name and not in Keval's name. We've got to shout out. We've got to be able to articulate a view that, look, we're a community which has a distinctive identity. And just as you don't say that, there is a European view on marriage, there is certainly not an Asian view on marriage. Yes, there are nuances and so on. And if you go back to practices, yes, there will be exceptions and odd practices and so on. And I don't want to delve on this because this is important sometimes. But why doesn't NHSF take a strong view on it?
Thank you very much, Manojji, for your insights, from starting with discussing the origins of NHSF as the founding president, discussing the media, discussing exactly what our role is individually, organizationally, and collectively as people from the Hindu tradition. I think a lot of our younger viewers are also interested in learning just a bit more about what advice you would give to your younger self. So as someone who's founded NHSF, set up a media house, and also worked on campaigns both in India and the UK, what advice would you give to any young student that wants to enter the world of media?
You read out my biography at the beginning, or part of it. I am here sitting with you today because of NHSF. NHSF for me wasn't a phase in my life. It molded my life. It molded my career. It gave me the opportunity to think, to argue with myself at times, and to articulate. It gave me some life skills, which, had I not been involved in National Hindu Students Forum, I wouldn't have had. I wouldn't have met the people I met if it wasn't for NHSF, and some very, very interesting and some very, very influential people as well that have been a part of my life stemmed from my time associated with National Hindu Students Forum. And above all, I made some of my closest friends whilst at university, and they remain my friends. That's because of NHSF, not despite NHSF. So my message to young people is, I'm sitting here before you, having seen 30 years of my career, my student life and my career. And when I reflect back on it, those 3, 4, or 5 years involved in NHSF were the ones that were the most precious. You'll all study and you'll study well and you'll get your degrees and you'll get your jobs. But the life skills that NHSF teaches are unparalleled. And ultimately, this is the time when you will be able to formulate your mission in life. I'm still working it out, and my mission keeps building and changing and whatever. But the foundations of your mission in life will come during these 3, 4, 5 years. And NHSF will have a huge role to play in that.
Thank you very much for those words, Manojji. We are nearing the end of our time today. But once again, I'd just like to express my gratitude to you for sharing your wisdom on how we can ensure that there is accurate Hindu and Indian representation in the media, and our role as active content producers and narrative producers to progress our voice. As I mentioned at the start of this session, this is just one of many talks we've had throughout the weekend hosted by NHSF UK at the Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020. We are now approaching the end of the conference, but I would just like to remind the audience that they can visit www.nhsf.org.uk/these-2020 to see all of our content and to hear from even more speakers. This afternoon, following this, we will have a global Hindu students panel. We are joined by other Hindu student leaders from the United States, from New Zealand, and also Drishti G. May, our national president of NHSF UK. I hope that you have all enjoyed this session. Please continue engaging with us and with our work, and I hope to see you all very, very soon. Pranam and Namaste.